Hello, so today I am talking to Coral Hill, who works for the University of Law as an Associate Professor, Head of the Foundation Year of the LLB, and also does some really interesting work that she's been telling me about managing international projects for students who speak multiple languages, which I'm personally always in awe of. And I believe Coral mentioned as well that she used to practice as a litigator. Perhaps she'll mention a little bit about that to us when we say hello. So thank you, Coral, for coming to talk to me.
Thank you very much.
So yeah, you did mention to me that you practiced as a litigator one time, did you?
That's correct. So when I qualified at Hempson's doing clinical negligence, and then later on went to what was then Manchys, now Pennington Manchys Cooper, I think. So I did litigation for some years, initially clinical negligence and then large technical disputes.
Oh, thank you very much. So how long ago was that? When did you leave practice?
I left practice almost 30 years ago. It's a very, very long time ago, and I don't regret it one bit. It was very enjoyable while I was there. But initially I made the move to go into education, and I was doing it as a kind of temporary thing. And then I absolutely loved it. It was just such a different environment and so much more about ideas and people and so on. And I've been very fortunate in my career with what was then the College of Law, now University of Law, dealing with lots of online education. I was involved in setting up a legal network TV where we did education videos, as it was in those days, and that eventually morphed into dealing with projects on online learning, tutorials, podcasts, etc. So all stuff I really enjoyed.
Wow, it sounds so interesting. It always amazes me how people manage to fit so much into their careers. It does sound really exciting.
Yeah, I think that more and more people want to have more variety, and that's probably a function partly of us working longer and longer. But I do think that education careers lend themselves to doing lots of different types of things. There's so many, if you're interested in learning, there's so many extra subjects you could do, or even just applying it in different scenarios. So it is quite a kind of unique training, really.
Yeah, no, it really is. So I'm going to move on to the questions I've got for you about where we're at right now, because as I mentioned to you before we started here, you're the first person I'm talking to in this, what I hope will be a series. I hope it's less than 12 in the series, i.e. that we're going to do one a week, and maybe we will be back to inverted commas normal in 12 weeks, but I don't know if that's going to be the case. But anyway, this is the first of the series looking at people in the legal profession, the legal career, and those surrounding it, how we're all coping with this sudden move to obviously working from home, but now being in lockdown as well. So what I wanted to ask you first, just to sort of set the scene for where you're at, is how much did you work from home before now? What did before the last couple of weeks look like for you?
Okay, so the immediate past, I wasn't working at home very much at all, because the way the university is set up was they have an open door policy, so they wanted you to be there so students could come in and just call in and see you. But before so about 2.5, 3 years ago, I did do a lot of working at home, and also when I was traveling I was working, and so I was very, very used to it, and I always found that I got a lot out of it, particularly if I had a discrete project to finish. There's nothing like, and I always one of those people at university that loved writing a big essay or whatever. So if I've got something like that to do, nothing better than having 2 days at home, and that's all you're going to do, and just look at your emails very rarely. It gives you a great sense of accomplishment, but it also requires a lot of planning ahead. I think I've always found that the most tricky thing about working at home, really kind of having a schedule and making sure you bring everything with you that you want, because even when you're connected to the network, you don't necessarily want to be downloading stuff all the time. So yeah, I did have a lot of experience of it, but this has been a totally different experience, as you can imagine. This week has been such a shock, I think, for the entire population.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So just before we have a bit more of a chat about how this week has been for you, who do you have at home with you? What have you got going on at home as well?
Okay, there's three of us in the household. So my husband, who's also working from home, and my son, who's just turned 18, and of course is no longer doing A levels. He's kind of hanging around, probably doing too much gaming, I think, and so on, and eating chocolate.
Yeah. Oh, okay. No, that's brilliant. So the big question is, how has this week been for you? You know, the highs, the lows, the difficult points, the funny points, anything that you want to share with us about how this week has gone.
Okay. So we have one little, what was originally a sort of box room bedroom, which we've always used as our study. So of course everybody wanted that. And in fact, that was the first thing we did, like where are we all going to be? And of course my son wanted his own space. So he's lucky enough to have, a big enough bedroom to have a desk and so on there. And we converted another bedroom, which is where I am now, moved the bed out of the way. We bought a chair because within 2 days I was having an aching back from working at the dining room table. So bought an adjustable chair. We're waiting for a proper table. So we did go to quite a lot of effort to, rearrange the house. And also we had a massive clear out because of course we've all brought home with us an enormous amount of paperwork and laptops and all the rest of it. So I just was determined that that wasn't going to encroach on our time together when we're eating or relaxing. I wanted it all out of the way, so we needed to have clear cupboards to put stuff away in and so on, rather than it just taking over the whole house. So of course that meant we were rather busier than normal, so actually organising that. I would say, as with everybody, even though we all work from time to time from home, all three of us have and are used to technology, it's still been really different this week just because of the complete working from home, and everybody else you're dealing with is perhaps having to get used to your systems or vice versa and work around each other. But I think that was the main challenges. So I would hope that will calm down a little bit. And I think for me, because I've normally picked to work from home when I have a major project, a report I'm writing or something like that, the main difference has been I felt too glued to my computer in terms of the mic. I've had a lot of long meetings where it's actually quite difficult to stand up enough and move around, and it just felt uncomfortable really, and not able to not get exercise, because normally I would walk to the tubes 10 minutes, I will walk the other end, you'd have just all those normal going out business, of course, is our kind of footprint, isn't it? Whereas when you're at home, going from the commute from the bedroom to the other bedroom, start working, takes like 3 steps or something. So, yeah, so it's quite different.
Absolutely, yes. I'm sure I'm not alone in realizing that my step counter is really not going up very much at the moment. Yeah, yeah. You shared something with me just before we started, actually, when we talked about the highs very briefly, and you said, there are a lot of high points to working from home, and I've always been a very big fan of working from home and always talked about those. But you were saying to me that that's difficult to see at the moment.
Yes, I think so, just because it's for all of us, it was such a rush. It wasn't a kind of measured, planned thing. Certainly for the university, we were hoping to carry on face-to-face teaching at a certain point, and then decided that the situation was getting to a point where they had to end only 3 days short of where they were planning it, but it did mean that there was still more of a rush. But as I say, I'm sure those bits will quieten down. But I'm not going to have the high or the sense of I really like being at home on my own occasionally and working through something, and you can put all your stuff where you want. So I feel more like I'm in an office, in the sense that I've got to stay in this room, and if I go outside I might end up having a conversation with my son and my husband, and it's not the right moment for me or for them, and you get distracted from what you're doing, so it doesn't have those highs that normally you would have from working at home. But it's still, it certainly beats getting the tube To be frank, I'm in London, so you know, long commute always is exhausting. So at least you can stick a washing in to start with, and that kind of thing, or you know, you can have your coffee break in the garden. So I always appreciate those things. I always think, you know, real up for you know, advantage of being at home.
Definitely. And is there anything that you've learnt about yourself or about working from home this week, perhaps, that you think might be useful for others they may not have realised yet?
Well, I think the thing that I find most helpful, and because my husband's been working at home for quite a while, whenever I wanted to, we found that we knew too much about each other's days. So when you come to have supper together, I don't want to know every single detail of his day, nor he does of mine. So what we actually had already, well, on the occasion that we overlapped at home, got into a habit of having lunch separately. So going at our own times, and not being rude, but you know, avoid not trying to, not kind of like tell it, go, do you know what's just happened? So not treating him like a work colleague, so that I can say that stuff in the evening. Otherwise, particularly at the moment with this lockdown, you've got nothing to say. And so all three of us have been trying to do that, kind of have our own space during the day totally, and not kind of say, what are you up to now? Or, you know, do you want to have a sandwich or whatever? Try and do things as separately as you can, which you know, we're lucky enough to have a house. Obviously, if you're, you know, in a flat, it's always going to be more difficult to do that.
No, I think that's a really valid point. That's really useful. It's something I hadn't actually thought about yet, because I've been at home obviously this week as well with my husband and our children. And yes, it's not something that's come up yet. But if we have got weeks and weeks of this to come, then I think that's a really good point. It's something I will think about as well. Thank you for that. That's really good. Something I didn't mention to you in our pre-discussed questions, and you may say actually it hasn't happened yet, but I'm going to ask you anyway. Have you had a moment yet where, I don't know, I suppose I phrased it this morning of I sort of cracked and the tears came, and I'd been okay until then, but I was doing a rhythm time singing class with my 2-year-old online, and suddenly when we were saying the goodbye song, it just suddenly hit me that it was going to be a long time until we'd be doing that class in person again, and that was a bit of a moment for me. So I don't know whether you've had one yet or not. Have you had any moments yet where sort of the enormity of the situation or anything has hit you, do you think?
I think I have. I think we all have, and in fact, the fact I've been so busy with setting things up and working has helped. But when we stop for the evening, it does feel really upsetting and quite overwhelming. And I think for us, one of the key, and I think probably initially everybody was watching, the Prime Minister was doing his press meetings at 5:30, I think it was, and we were watching. And now we're trying to not watch the news so much because it's just really difficult sometimes to cope with in the evening. And we're also, I've always been a fan of what I call digital sundown, which is making sure that everything that's not of real leisure, social aspects, screens, emails, social media off. People can't kind of jump into space in the evening and upset you or worry you with some notification that there's nothing you can do about it. It's better to wait for the next morning. Otherwise, for me, it can interrupt my sleep. It can really worry me. And, you know, you wouldn't have people just coming and rapping on your door and telling you some horrible bit of news. So I've always been very keen on that. I'm sure my 18-year-old doesn't do that, though. I think he's probably chatting well into the late evening with his friends. So there we go.
Oh no, that's another really great tip, actually. You're absolutely right there, that because we've got our work and our home life effectively in one place at the moment, then as you say, having that shut off time in the evening or whenever it is for people is really important as well, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, thank you so much, Coral. It's been really lovely to chat to you. You were the first person I've spoken to on this series of Friday chats. So it's been really lovely. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hannah. Thanks.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.